Everyone. Welcome to the Water Quality Protection Land Speaker Series. We're really happy to have you here today. The Water Quality Protection Lands, or the WQPL, protect groundwater in the Barton Springs segment of the Edwards Aquifer through the conservation and restoration of large connected natural areas in Hays and Travis counties. By restoring grassland savanna ecosystems and healthy riparian corridors, the WQPL not only supplies high-quality water to recharge the aquifer, but also provides habitat for wildlife, protects cultural resources, and supports research to better understand the natural world protected by these lands. Today, we're so happy to have Rich Zarria with us. Several volunteers on our land restoration work days have asked us about how we look for these caves and sinkholes that are so important to the work that we do. And so this installment of the Water Quality Protection Land Speaker Series focuses on that, on how to use LiDAR to find karst, sinkholes, and caves. In just a minute, I'll turn it over to Rich. Before I do, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Kate McCann-Teran with Austin's Water Wildland Conservation Division, joined by Carly Taylor, who works with me as well. So partway through the presentation, and then again at the end, we'll have time for question and answer sessions. The way to participate in that is to enter a question in the Q&A box, which you might see at the top or the bottom of your screen, not in the chat. It helps us for you to put it in that question and answer box. We'll be recording the webinar and we'll make sure to post it on Facebook and our YouTube channel sometime next week. And on that note, I'll stop sharing and I'll hand it over to Rich.
Okay, well, yes, like she said, my name is Rich Zarria. Thank you to Wildlands, WQPL, BCP, all those folks for the opportunity to present and to be on these lands and to use them and do studies and science. It's just a lot of fun to be on these properties, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all. Detecting karst sinkholes via LiDAR analysis. This picture on the front, we'll see once again in the presentation. It's a pretty sinkhole in South Austin. This is Kentucky Sink. This is in South Austin. It's one of the sinkholes that did get turned into a stock pond, and it's really neat to see. You can see it from the road when you drive by it, but it's neat to see from a LiDAR view. So let's get into it here. So objectives today. It's a little bit about LiDAR, but it's a little bit about caves and why I wanted to use LiDAR to find caves. I'm not a LiDAR expert, sort of am now, but I wasn't when I started. I used it as a tool. So we're going to look at the overview of cave and karst resources in Central Texas. We're going to look at the importance of why we want to find them, to groundwater recharge, aquifer levels, science, biology, that sort of thing. We'll look at my journey into the world of LiDAR, and then we'll look at pretty pictures and examples of karst sinkholes, depressions detected with this technology. So a little bit of housekeeping. So the caves and sinkholes I'm going to show you are I'm going to reference them by region. This will allow me to show you sensitive things that you don't know are sensitive things, but are still really good examples of LiDAR stuff that I found. And so it's sanitized by anonymity. I told Kate earlier, I'm not going to show a whole ton of LiDAR examples from the WQPL. Our caves in Texas and Central Texas and the Austin recharge region are awesome, but their depressions that show up are often very small. They're not as cool to look at. So I'm going to be showing you things from all of Texas and bigger examples. So it's not just little dimple after little dimple. So my particular process, I've spent several thousand hours developing. We're not going to go into detail about how I do my my process in this presentation. I'm gonna make it more of a broad conceptual view of what I do and why I do it. Photographs, there's a couple that are credited to the photographers as needed. If they're not, I apologize, I missed a few. The units of measure, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold, so I've got a tickly cough that I can't control. Apologies. The standard of caving in Mexico is to measure in meters, and so Texas does meters rather than feet. The rest of the country does feet broadly, and so you'll see a lot of things expressed in meters, and that's why we do that here in Texas. And then the Q&As, like they said, I want to hear every question you've got with the time that we've got, so write them down as you need. So who is this guy? Who is Rich Zarria? This is me at Main Drain Cave in Utah, where I had to go into a cave that was very, very cold. And I was smiling after being very, very intimidated. I saw a really big cave before I was ready, and that's me up in the 9,000 feet up in the air in Utah. My background: I'm an Indiana native. Been in Texas for around 20 years plus now. I got my degree in horticulture from Purdue University. I've done the Texas Agricultural Lifetime Leadership here in Texas. I like the agriculture. I like the plants. I'm on the board of the Texas Speleological Survey, which is the caver-run nonprofit that controls all the cave data for the state of Texas. And I'm an Eagle Scout, and I like to be outside. There's me and some friends in the hot springs by the Rio Grande on a Big Bend. So like I said, I'm a native plant specialist. I spent 7 years at the largest native plant nursery in the state, and I really like being outside, which in caving made it even better for me because I get to go to the same ranches I went to before, see the same plants, but I get to go in the caves too, which is kind of fun. So I found caving. I've seen many wonderful things. Let me turn on this little laser pointer here. This is a big cave in the Western Edwards Plateau out in Rock Springs. This is me on rope in a cave in called Valhalla in Alabama. That's actually a Tom Whitehurst photo. This is me in a karst landscape near the border. This was a LiDAR find. This is a really neat round sinkhole type aperture at the bottom. And I've been and seen very big stuff. This is the deepest cave in the Western Hemisphere, Sistema Huautla, down in the state of Oaxaca. So I've been as deep as 2,200 feet under the ground, camping in the caves and doing big stuff. But I really, really like our small Texas caves here in the Hill Country. So Texas caves, what is karst? So it's a terrain formed by the dissolution of bedrock and is generally characterized by sinkholes and caves that channel water underground. So when you're on a karst landscape, you see sinkholes, you see all sorts of the action of slightly acidic rainwater eating the limestone away. Texas has around 13,000 plus cave sinkholes and springs. They're primarily in Cretaceous age, about 100 million years old, Edwards limestone on the Edwards Plateau, the Glen Rose and the Austin Chalk. Longest cave in Texas, 33.3 kilometers or 20.7 miles down in Comal County. And then the deepest cave in Texas is Sorcerer's Cave, 570 feet deep in Terrell County. Caves are full of things, invertebrates like this wonderful pseudoscorpion, photo by Colin Strickland at the city of Austin, works at Cape. Salamanders, bats, fish in certain special areas, entrance dwellers like raccoons, porcupines, ticks, all that, rattlesnakes, and many more. Caves are really wonderful. The science is really cool, and I count myself lucky to know all the scientists that actually do the really good work inside these things. These are the karst regions of Texas. I cave primarily in the recharge zone, which is this red area right here. This is where the streams are flowing from west to east, and they cross the deep cracks in the ground formed by the uplift of the Edwards Plateau, and the water makes it down and has made caves over long periods of time. One of our longtime cavers have said that cavers have only seen about 25% of the limestone in the state, so there's much more to see. I've seen quite a few of these regions, but not all of them. So what's my personal motivation to find caves? Excuse me. This is a slide from another presentation I gave a while ago. Caves allow water to recharge the aquifer. They function best when they're unplugged. Caves get plugged for lots of reasons. Natural, ranchers filled them in. We need them to be open, to have access to the surface, so that those invertebrates can come in and out, and the cave crickets can bring the food in there and run the ecosystems. And when they're plugged, they're still there, but they don't function quite as well. So one of the reasons that I like to find caves is because I'm a digger. We'll find these plugged sinkholes, and we attempt to remove all the dirt and the rocks and the boulders that are blocking the entrances, and get into open passage and get that system working again. It's great fun. I love to do it, and it's really honestly my primary motivation for finding caves. I tell people I love caves, but I'm really a sinkhole guy. I like a nice sinkhole like this. We'll see images of this later, but this is a dig that we do. out near Wimberley, out in the hill country, and this one is one of the largest that we've done by hand. But this is what I like to do, is dig, and we find really good stuff. This one is a big find from a couple of years ago. This is not LiDAR. Well, this wasn't a LiDAR find, but could have been. We were already working on the property, but the nearby caves in this area are relatively flat and relatively short, and we found a cave that had more than 600 feet of passage, has a 60-foot long room in there, tall enough to walk upright. It was like finding another Grand Canyon in the state of Nebraska. You know, we completely unprepared. This is the kind of thing we're going for when we dig on or go look for any caves. This one just happens to be in an area that's close to our hearts on the wildlands. So we've established that I like caves. Caves are great. I have had a great time for the last 10 years doing it. Cave restoration or digging is great. Camping in the desert is awesome. Working with copperheads right next to me in a cave is awesome and kind of scary, but fun. And I got to the point where I wanted to find even more. You know, normally, like in the old days, the way you'd find a cave is hearsay. You know, someone would say, "Hey, I've got this ranch or a friend, they've got this black hole in the ground," and we would say, cavers, would say, "Well, let's go check it out." Come with all their gear. Or you go to a piece of property and you just start walking in the woods, and in a karst terrain, you can come across sinkholes and find things that are find caves, or formal karst walks where you line up one after another in a big line and literally walk together and comb the woods, hoping to hit everything. That was the old way of doing it, but I wasn't satisfied with that. So I was raised in northern Indiana around Lutherans, a very practical people. And so I knew there was a more efficient way to do things. So it turned out this is Martin Luther here. And it turns out he had some good advice for me from his deathbed on February 18th, 1546. His last words were, "Try systematically scanning the ground surface with LiDAR." That's what Martin Luther said. So I did it. I heard about LiDAR. And what is LiDAR? Okay, so LiDAR stands for light detecting and ranging. I'm no expert on all of this, but I know the basics. So a plane will fly over the land at altitude, and there's these very powerful laser producers that will fire millions of laser pulses at the ground very rapidly. And then some of those laser pulses will bounce back to a sensor on the plane, and it can very accurately read the distance to that point, and it can paint a picture of the ground surface, sort of like a topographic map. And then you can look at that when it's rendered in 3D, 2D, and see, as you'll see in a minute, and see any anomalies. And so, the classic view of LiDAR that you'll see is a stadium or a downtown. It's usually has to do with buildings. I really don't want to. I stay away from the cities. I go out into the wilds and just look at the bare ground surface, looking for any anomalies, sinkholes, depressions, like you'll see. So this is the basics of LiDAR. So plane, and they can do it with drones, planes, helicopters. There's all sorts of ways to do it. But in this picture, we've got the airplane. So who has this LiDAR? So the Texas Natural Resources Information Service through the state of Texas, and I think they just changed their name actually to something different. But this is an older presentation. They host the LiDAR, what's called a point cloud data, and a point cloud is basically all of those laser points in a very large file. Some of these files I'll download will be 8 gigabytes of data. They host multiple different resolutions depending on the age. The oldest ones are a poorer resolution, and the newer stuff gets better and better as far as resolution. I primarily use 50 centimeter and 70 centimeter sets. One of the recent additions was I think this one right here, West Texas LiDAR 2019, covered a large area of West Texas, which is really exciting because there's lots of limestone out there that's really never been looked at, big ranches, that sort of thing. And we've got also a new 28 centimeter set for the core of Austin, but I haven't done much work with that yet, but that's pretty exciting. My standard's been 50 and 28 is going to be better, so that's neat. So the process, and this is where this is just going to be basic. There are viewers that you can use to view LiDAR data. You have to turn it from the point cloud into actually something that you can see. Some people use ArcGIS, QGIS, there's a Fugro product and others. Tenris is Tenris is where I get my stuff, but there are other locations to download it. The federal government, state government, there's all sorts of portals. We're sort of, I'd say, you could say we're in the early days of LiDAR. You hear about it used on cars and, scanning the insides of buildings. And so, 10, 20 years from now, this is going to be a lot more user friendly. My early efforts were were a lot of stumbles. I didn't know how to use it. So when my friend Mason and I first sat down 6, 7 years ago to look at LiDAR data, we didn't know how to, we got the stuff downloaded, but we didn't know how to locate ourselves in the city. And so I finally found out that there was a primer, a grid that shows you where you're looking. And once I found that, the world opened up. I've learned a lot. Let me tell you, I started from zero. I use QGIS, open source, to do all the different coordinate reference systems, and I'm still babe in the woods. A lot of what I do, once it works, I just kind of like a monkey repeat it. I'm not an expert in any of this as far as the functioning of the system. For data management, I use a program called WallsMap. There's lots of ways to store GIS data, but that's what I use. So basically, I do a grid search. For example, it's like, imagine painting a wall with a paint roller. You go all the way up, and then you move it over and go all the way down. There's a lot of folks that are trying to automate this process, and a lot of efforts being made. Using ArcGIS to have the computer look for, do a depression analysis, like anything that's a little closed depression with a hole in the bottom, mark that. And people are having success, and it definitely does come up with stuff. But in the end, you have to ground truth and get out in the field on all this stuff. And so I found that the manual process that I'm doing, there's less walking. And the percentage of things that you look at being caves is higher. At 50 centimeter, which is like four laser points per square meter, I scan about 150 meter wide swath. So some of these properties can take a long time. I mean, projects will take 40, 50, 60, 80 hours on the computer. I do it over a long period of time. I'll put on a podcast and do it. And then the poorer the resolution, the wider the swath needs to be, so you're not picking up noise in the data. As I find an anomaly, I'll put a point down as a marker. And then there's some gymnastics to do with numbers and coordinate reference systems that I still are Greek to me, but I get it done with some help also from some of my collaborators. So when we do the ground truthing, I had a recent project that was around 1,500 acres, and I spent a week on the property after I did all the marking. I spent a week on the property wandering through the woods, checking 500 different possibilities for sinkholes, and I ended up with about 45. So about a 10% rate. If we're anywhere between 5 and 10% in the field, we're actually very happy. We had to learn that in the early days. But my largest tract is about 4,000 acres right now, and I've looked at well over 50,000 acres, and I wish I would have kept better records, but I imagine it's more. It's probably closer to 100,000. But I've really enjoyed doing this. It's I have the patience to sit in the evenings and put 2 or 3 hours a night into the stuff. So then ground truthing, this is the best part, really. Everybody can join. You get to go and see what you found, and it's like a it's just a big mystery. Are we going to run into just a shapeless hole in the ground, or are we going to run across something really fun? Excuse me. We pick up things like this. This is a really cool pour off in a creek out in this is out in the desert near the border. I didn't know this wasn't a cave entrance. This is a big pour off where the water would come off, and so kids can come. One thing we have to be careful of whenever you walk up to a cave entrance. Rattlesnakes like to live in the entrances to caves, and so if you increase the number of sinkholes you walk up to, you also increase the chances you'll run into a rattlesnake. So you have to be pretty careful when you do that. But we'll carry a stick stick and gently poke around, make sure that the snake lets us know we're there. Okay, now let's get on to some examples and some pretty pictures of karst features. So this is just an example of a large sink. This is in 50 centimeter resolution, which is kind of the gold standard for me in ranches anywhere near the I-35 corridor, which means, and I'll repeat it again, in a 3x3 area, and the average of 4 laser pulses will hit that square meter. And so that's the resolution you'll get. And so if you had resolution where it was, let's say 10 or 15 points per square meter, you're going to see smaller and smaller things. We've got a very large sink here, and we've got a minor sink here. It's funny that we actually, again, we would have found this on LiDAR, but before I did the LiDAR survey on this tract of land, one of my buddies was walking through the woods and actually stumbled across this just by sheer luck. And so it was also found on foot, but it would have shown up obviously in the LiDAR. And so anyway, we can't climb. This was a LiDAR lead either. Here's a zoomed in version. You can see 5 meters by 10 meters. And so it's about 30 feet long by about 15 feet. There's a couple of minor sinks. This one's known as thick dog sink. And these are known as thin dog sink. And you can see how they show up. And this is a picture of the actual feature when we found it. And so you can, I'll go back to this slide. You can see how it looks like well, I think it looks like a gravy boat. And you look at it in person, and it's like this. And we've actually done work on it. You saw a picture earlier, and there'll be I think there's another picture later on of this one. This one we looked at it the day we found it and said we're gonna dig that open by hand with a bunch of our friends. Okay, so let's look at another thing. So this is the importance of resolution. I told you about 70 centimeter and 50 centimeter. So there's a set out there that's 140 centimeter. Let me tell you, you can barely see a school bus parked in the woods at this resolution. But the reason I've got this up is because this property in particular had 140 and 70 centimeter on the same thing. So I was able to show you the difference. And so this is an old mining effort of some sort out in the hill country. They weren't going for gold or anything. I can't remember what it was, but it was a mine. And this is what it looks like at that 140 centimeter. It's very, very poor. I don't use this for anything. I tried in my early days, but had to learn the lesson that you can't really see anything. So there's the mine. And then this is in 70 centimeter, and you can see how much clearer that is. I'll go back. You can see how it's just this kind of odd dimple. And then when you go to this one, and you can look at all the different, this is the computer trying to connect the dots on, if 70 centimeters, 2 points per square meter, 140 centimeter might be 1 point per 4 square meters. I don't know what the conversion is, but it's really rough. But you'll see as I go from back to this one, you can see how it gets much clearer. The hole gets much clearer. The ground surface gets much clearer. And if you went to 50 centimeter and even better, you'd start to see it in better resolution. So some examples. This is a large sink in the desert out in Southwest Texas. This is a big subsidence, a karstic subsidence that's about 330 meters. It's a really big hole. One of my colleagues first wanted to go look here because he found something on the satellite that looked like a bit of a cliff face. And this was one of my first LiDAR projects when I said, well, hey, I found out this cool new technology new to me, and let's check it out. And so I opened it up, and it turned out there wasn't just one thing in there. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, and then actually if we zoomed in, there's several other plugged features that are down here. And then the photos of this one and this one are in the next slide. And so this is what we actually found when we went to ground truth it. So this one's down in the middle right here. So this one, I'll go back. This one is down there that we're looking down into that feature. And then this one is the picture to the left. And so, it's really fun, like I said, to walk up to these things. And so it's not just LiDAR, it's what we find and then what we actually go and check. And so the most amount of time you spend is in the field to see what you found. This was interesting in the LiDAR processing of so the plane flies over, does the laser pulses, and then there's computer processes where they'll they'll process it into the actual picture and then give that deliverable to a client. Well, in this case, I was scanning, and this caught my eye. It looks like a stock tank or a pool cover over a pool. And I remember seeing this and thinking, well, what is that? That kind of looks weird, but we're always looking for old windmills and old wells and stock ponds. And so I marked it just as an aside. And when we were out checking, it was the end of the day, and I said, well, I've got this weird thing, up there. Let's go check it out. It was like a 20-minute walk but I wasn't really confident that this was a cave. It was flat. It looked like there was water in there. We said, let's go check it anyway. Here's another view of it. You can see there's a kind of a depression, and then it's just flat. Well, we walked up, and it turned out to be something. And what was happening was the computer, the LiDAR data is not processed to find caves. It's just processed to find the ground surface. And so there was enough clutter and enough oddities at the bottom of the sink that the computer kind of threw it out and decided to just put a flat cover over the top of it because it didn't know what to do. Sort of the computer just gave up. This is the side view. The only reason I was able to see it the only reason I was able to see it in the LiDAR view was because I turned off the filter that took out all the anomalies, and so it was there. And this, I believe, is the picture of what we found. It was actually the biggest sink of the trip, and so we stood there, and everybody said no way, and so it's actually called No Way Cave. We found anyway. The reason I bring this up is because the technology is, at least for my application or the application that I'm talking about in this presentation, is, we're still in the the early days of being able to accurately find this stuff. So one of the biggest sinks showed up like this. And so an interesting side note. And I think we had another one. And on the same project, we were checking LiDAR leads out in the desert, and I got a report and a picture from one of the teams that said, "Hey, we find something giant over here," but it wasn't one of our LiDAR leads. And I thought to myself, I remembered the area, and I said there wasn't anything big over there, and I was confused. Turned out to be great. There was actually groundwater down there, which is what we look for, so we can get the divers and scientists down there and see what. So it was a great find, and I didn't know what was going on, and so we're getting nerdy, but go with me on this. So there were several different LiDAR sets for that area over the years, spaced out, let's say 5 years apart, all of the same resolution, 70 centimeter, and this is an example of one of the sets I used. This feature showed up just fine. You can see it in there. But look what it did to this feature, the one they stumbled across. The computer put a pool cover over it. And so I skipped over it because my eye didn't catch it. And once again, I'm doing this by eye, and I'll rotate the ground surface in 3D to catch it. Well, once I got home, I went right to the Tenors data, downloaded all 3 of them, and looked at the same spot. 2 out of the 3 tossed this one out because they thought it was a mistake, but one of them caught it. I just didn't look at the right LiDAR set, and so if I would have looked at this LiDAR set, I would have caught it, but with this one I didn't. So it makes us wonder. It was a very large project. What else did I miss? If the computer's throwing out just the giant sinks, what did I miss? So kind of nifty to see that mystery solved. Here's another example of the difference in resolutions. So you'll see this is in 70 centimeter, and there's a pin right here on a little sink that you can see. It looks like a little divot, and something that I would mark. I wouldn't mark these. They're kind of a little bit large, but I marked that sink. Now, if you look at the same property in 50 centimeter, which is finer, it's gone. And so the sink that I was seeing in 70 centimeter is an anomaly and just a noise in the data. So it was a lesson I had to learn. I did a 4,000 acre ranch, and I looked too closely at a 70 centimeter set, and I found hundreds of things, and they turned out all to be bad. So it was, there was no manual for me to follow when I started doing this. And so now I know, if you're looking, the lower the resolution, the farther away you have to look, and satisfy yourself with just finding the larger things. So that's example there. Also, it's nifty to see when you find a LiDAR feature, a feature on LiDAR, you can also go to the satellite and see it. And so in this situation, we've got this big hole, and that's a big hole there. And then this small hole is a smaller second entrance, and so we could see it on satellite. And then you see it in the field, of course, was a lot of fun. So here, here's a collage of some other ones from across the state that I've found. The artistic aspect also appeals to me. The way that this is, you can look at this in black and white. You can usually render these in multiple different ways, but in this color scheme, I just love how, you know, this one, that one, they're kind of pretty. Some of these are really big. In this particular collage, some of these are 20 feet wide. And then some more examples, some more eye candy. This one is a monster, 22 meters across in the desert. The creek flows down, and actually the creek goes into the cave until I imagine the cave fills up and backs up, and then the water will run out of the sink and then head down towards the lower elevations. And in this the darker green, this is lower elevation, and as the colors change, you know, these are the highest tops of the hills in this picture. This is what it looked like when we found it. Unfortunately, plugged by many decades of branches and sticks and trees, and so we weren't able to get a diver down there. But the groundwater is fairly close. We were hoping that would be more. And then some more pictures. This is another one. This one's actually out in the hill country. This one's, sometimes we'll find them in classic karst terrains. This one, this big sink, that's probably about 20 feet wide. This one occurred in a broad, flat field full of thick soils. And so you're driving along this road here, and then all of a sudden you've got a big sink. And you know, if you don't see this on LiDAR, you could walk within 100 feet of this and not see it. So it's nice to have this revealed. And some more pretty pictures. This is also out in the West Texas desert. These are mostly plugged now. I believe this cave right here was open, but these are very large sinks. I think that one, you know, the distance here is probably 150 feet. Large, significant features. There's another one. These were also plugged, but we had to go check them. I've had to get used to, my collaborators, we've had to get used to disappointment when we walk up to larger features, because oftentimes they're plugged. This is a very large feature. I don't remember the distance from this. This is the drainage basin that goes into the sink, but that's, you know, that might be a 1/8 of a mile. It's a very large feature. This canyon, I think that I did some vertical exaggeration here. So this canyon is steeper than it actually is, but it helps show you don't just see the sink, but sometimes you'll see the area where it gathers water. There's another set of sinks. You can see one, there's a cave at the bottom of that, and there's a cave at the bottom of this one. Here's the picture, the cover, the cover of the presentation. This is that's that Kentucky sink down in South Austin, and so it's 42 meters wide, and you can see how all the different infeeders are still intact. Unfortunately, a lot of our sinkholes were abused in areas by early colonists. You know, they looked at this and saw the water that would during a large rain, these would collect quite a bit of water that would then rush down underground, and they thought, well, we could use that, and so they would take a large sink like this and line it with clay and make a stock pond and collect that water. Which would cause other problems, because if the water can't go down into an internal drainage basin like this, then it would have to fill up all the way over top and then go into a neighboring creek and then run on the surface. And so this one is, I've never been down in this, but I've heard that it's fairly plugged. I'm sure it still takes water, but this is an example of a large Austin sink that we have. Here's a view of Devil's Sinkhole State Park, State Natural Area. I'm not sure what they call it, but out near Rock Springs. It's one of the deepest pits we have in Texas. This is the rendering, and this is the view. Oh yeah, and here's from the surface, so you can see that little dimple right there. And this is what's called a LiDAR tile, and so this is what I'll open up. And so only the largest things will show up when you're looking from 40,000 feet. And so this is such a big feature that it'll actually show up. So whenever I open a LiDAR tile and I actually see something right away, I know it's really, really big. And this is the view. This is the view from the side. And so you can see how the laser pulses were going down from the surface. And so the cave actually bells out, and the pit is larger in the sides like this, but the LiDAR laser pulses only go down. So for example, cliffside caves, I won't be able to pick up because you would have to have a LiDAR sensor that was firing sideways into the cliff. But so anything in a cliff, well, I don't see. It's just from straight down. It looks like I've ripped through this really, really quick today. So challenges. So organization and data handling is, for me particularly, that's one of the challenges that I have is organizing the data. I'm always trying to get better at and more efficient at the scanning process, and I've gotten a lot better than early days. If you think about that paint roller idea where you're going up and then moving it over and then coming down, on a lower resolution you get to use a much bigger roller, but you're missing smaller features that disappear into the noise. The higher the resolution, the smaller that roller gets. And so it's one of the things, like I mentioned earlier, that there's a 28 centimeter set for Austin now, and I think about scanning with 28 centimeter, and imagine, the room's going to go a lot quicker if your roller's 2 feet wide. But if you're working with a roller that's 4 inches wide, that's a lot of passes. And so the time goes up. We'll get smaller features, we'll get better detail. And so when I think about what would be ideal to have in the future, there's a point that it would get inefficient. So if 50 is the gold standard, what would be better? 40, 30, 20? There's a number when you get down that we'd be finding features so small, A, that they wouldn't be enterable by people and investigated by scientists, but B, it would take so long that who's got the time, right? So I've had to learn how to accept, for example, at 70 centimeter to just get the big ones. I don't look for I don't go looking for everything on 70 centimeter anymore. Time investment's really, really high. This is not for everyone. It's why everybody wants to automate it. Someday with AI, there'll be you'll draw a square around a piece of land and hit a button and all the sinkholes will pop up. But we're not there yet. So it takes a lot of patience. A lot of data storage. I have a external hard drive with many gigabytes of data that are on there. Once I've downloaded them. And then with higher resolution, I just can't wait for there are certain ranches where I only have 70 and we don't have 50 yet. So, just Tenor slowly will release a new set, and it's always exciting when it happens. Why I do this is this right here. This is one of my, again, not a LiDAR find, but one of my favorite digs, a cave that I opened up on wildlands. And this is what my motivation is. And I love to open them up, and I love to give my friends a call, the people who do the specialty science aspects, and say, hey, we found a new room. It's time to come in and check for spiders and centipedes. And that's kind of why I do that. So yeah, I really tore through that. It's 36 minutes.
Oh, that's great. We have lots of
Do
questions.
you? Okay. All right. Yeah, I appreciate your patience with all that. I know it's a lot of information, but thank you for listening, and I'm ready for all of it. So fire away.
Great. No, it was really fun. I know some of that, and it's really fun to watch and see it and go through. So we'll start from the beginning. Some of these you've answered a little bit as your presentation continued, but I'm going to ask them anyway,
Sure.
just in case there's more to mine there. Are there any places that you found this method to fail? For example, lots of slope changes around hills and mountains. You answered that a little bit, but anything
Sure.
to add there?
Yeah, so a couple things come to mind. Yes, the more mountainous the terrain, the bigger the feature has to be to make itself known in and around that slope. And so there's I've worked on something in West Texas where some of the valleys are incredibly rugged, and I know for sure that lurking in there in that noise is are things. But again, a lot of this has been trial and error, but I've had to learn to avoid avoid my gaze and just I got to stay away from the rough stuff. One of the examples is creek beds. So in caving, when you have a cave entrance that's either formed by being the bottom of a creek or the creek intersects over cave passage, it's called a swallet, and it's where direct recharge happens. Like the beautiful picture that Kate had on when she was doing the introduction is Onion Creek, where Onion Creek crosses the several miles of the recharge zone south of Austin. There are innumerable holes in the creek bed where we get direct recharge, literal whirlpools where the water is directly recharging our aquifer at a great rate. Unfortunately, at the bottom of creek beds also are many jumbled boulders and scours. And at the in my early days, I would go down, I would see a creek bed and I would see, oh, there's a hole, there's a hole, there's a hole. And I would go and mark those, and 99.9% of the time, they would be a scour, creek scour, just the action of the water moving boulders and making what looks like a sink, but is really just a swirl. Just the water's powerful. That being said, I do mark things on hillsides in rugged canyons and creek beds when I'm sure. And the how am I sure? Just long experience of being disappointed in the field and going, okay, I got to remember that next time. And so I'll still mark things on hillsides and creeks, but that's usually what happens. This recent project in West Texas, the huge areas of rugged canyons. I know there's caves all over there, but I kind of forced myself to say I can't. I just don't do it, because it's a time thing. You have to spend a lot of time in the field, not just my time, but oftentimes we'll put together teams. Team of two, you take these. Team two, team three, and it's just I've had to learn to value the time of not just me doing the LiDAR survey, but also the people in the field.
That's a great point. Yes, the swallowts in the creek are really tricky. It's really fun when it rains and you can see the water going in to go
Yeah.
spend some time hiking the creek.
Mhm.
Another question that I've heard a lot from folks when first hearing about LiDAR is this question is about how does the success rate for finding karst features with LiDAR change between areas with that have a lot of vegetation? So some areas that have a lot of trees or don't have as many trees. Can you talk to us about
Sure.
whether vegetation matters?
Sure, vegetation does matter, but not as much as you'd think. Even in dense forests, the plane flying over fires so many millions of pulses that they make it through the canopy. Now, that being said, most of these are flown during leaf off for the deciduous trees, and so they're flown for the best results when the non-evergreen trees have dropped their leaves in the wintertime. And so that's what they try to do, but you can even do it in the summertime. It's just you are going to get you get slightly less, but you'd think a thick forest canopy would block it all. It doesn't. Those laser pulses will make it down through there, which kind of blows my mind a little. Um, the lower resolution, what I found also is that when you get these LiDAR sets, they'll classify them. They'll say bare earth, low vegetation, medium, high, buildings, and that's all done in the computer. But one thing that's found, and we've found, and some of my collaborators have found that mesquite trees out in the desert, oftentimes the computer will sense those things. That will sense the branches and will hit them, but then throw them out in a way that's confusing because it'll tie them together into something that looks like a two-dimensional sink. And I've spent I went out in the desert and spent a whole day with the time of, 6, 8 people, going from one acacia or mesquite tree or, to another and another and realizing, oh my God, I marked trees the entire time. They weren't sinks. Again, a lesson I had to learn. So they're definitely, yeah, there's no book to follow. Like I'm writing it as I go, but yeah, I've learned I see things now and I'm like, no, 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 you're not gonna, you're not gonna fool me there. But just by straight trial and error have I learned all these lessons.
That's a great example and kind of leads into our next question, which is about uh, how much you've looked into GIS capabilities with AI and machine learning in particular to automate processes
Sure.
for
Yeah.
detecting depressions.
I know people are working on it, and there may be people that have succeeded and are just kind of like me. I have thousands of hours into developing my process, and so I'm kind of loath to give it all away as far as what I do, just because of the amount of time I put into it. AI is going to need positive hits to learn what it is, because it can't just learn. That's the whole trick with AI. It's going to have to be taught what to look for, and then once it's taught, then it can go look for it itself. And so there's going to be someday, if that's not already happening, giving 2,000 positives to a computer and saying, okay, this is what sinks look like, and now go look for your own. It'll take training and lots of time in the field, but um, I've heard people say that just the more tech savvy folks have said we'll eventually get there. Seems like we're going to get there with lots of aspects of our society, for good or for bad. But it'll be there. I don't have much contact with it. I'm in the trenches just doing it by hand.
Yeah, yeah. Great. We're so glad that you are.
Mhm.
Another question is, and you went over this, but can you talk again about what the different resolutions mean, kind of for practical purposes? For example, 50 centimeters versus
Sure.
points per meter.
Yeah, sure. So this is where I'm going to be way, way out of my depth. But so the two things that I think that I remember that I know. So for that 70 centimeter, when I say that there's an average of 2 points per square meter, you can just I don't know how else to say it. Just there's just a spread of those laser points. Let me see. Um, you can have a drone. So things have let me back up again. When Texas commissions these LiDAR sets that are publicly available, they'll say, hey, we're going to call this the Brazos Valley Metropolitan set, and we're going to do these 3.5 counties, and they have a list of contractors that have this technology, have the planes, have the LiDAR sensors, and they'll go and do the flights, and then they'll give a deliverable. These are, when I say 50 centimeter and 70 centimeter, these are from a plane flying quite high. I can't tell you how high, but it's pretty high. They're covering large amounts of land. They're not there looking for a 2 foot wide cave entrance that Rich and his friends can squeeze in someday. And so the and so a 50, the idea of a 70 centimeter set, they're just covering a large area to get large landforms, large drainage basins, that sort of thing. You can, on the other end of the scale these days, the technology is quite advanced. You can have a drone fly over and get 1 centimeter, which is like more than 100 points per square foot. So imagine 2 points per square meter versus 100 points per square foot. And again, please don't take these numbers literally, but it's the scale we're talking about. I'm not on the technological side, but if you have 100 points per square foot, what you're going to be able to resolve is much, much better than 2 points per square meter. And so when I use 70 centimeter, and I don't even know why they call it 70 centimeter. um, I'm only able to see the really, really big stuff. And so there's projects where I found huge sinks, but I know I've missed, if you found 25 huge sinks, you've missed 150 medium-sized sinks, and you've missed 300 small ones. And so, that's about as far as I can go as far as the actual description. It's just basically the distance that the sensor flies, and then how fast it goes. If a plane could fly very, very slowly over that ground with the same technology, it would get more laser pulses, and you get more points per square whatever foot meter. I hope that helps, but I knew that I would get hung up by these questions as far as like technicalities and like actual numbers. I that's about as far as I can go. It's just the slower the sensor goes, and the closer to the ground, the more laser points you can get anywhere, and then the more you can see.
Great. No, that's great. LiDAR has been in the news recently, related to caves as well. And so we had a couple questions related to that, kind of thinking about, have you looked at LiDAR surfaces from below, like sinks that appear as stalactites hanging down, or, have you been following the kind of use of LiDAR in cave mapping?
Sure. The people are working on it and have been. We've got cavers that have built their own units where they basically set up a stand and then let it's usually involves a mirror spinning, and then the laser, LiDAR doesn't have to be from top down. It can do anything. And so let's say in the older days, they would have to have a unit that was sitting still, and then it would sort of quote unquote take the picture of where it was, and then they would move that forward 20, 30 feet, 10 feet, whatever it took, and then it would take another picture and then move it forward. I know technology in this area is just like a rocket ship right now. And I know that for mining applications in the interior of buildings, there are handheld sensors that once you tell it, hey, this is point one, we're starting at the door, you can walk through the building with a scanner, basically painting the walls, and it'll get the inside of a building, the inside of a mine. The way that cave survey works right now is we basically, in the old days, it was a tape measure basically to measure point to point, and then we'd have to get the compass bearing, and it's sort of the old way of doing it to put a cave map together. We will get to the point when there'll be a handheld sensor that, maybe it's spinning on top of your helmet. Who knows where it'll be, but eventually we'll get 3D maps rather than having to create sort of a representation. So it's in process. People are working on it, smarter people than me in these areas. And so I know we'll eventually get there. That'll be the cave standard. It might be 10, 15, 20 more years. I don't know, but they're working on it. LiDAR will be part of our lives in lots of different aspects in the future.
Great. Yeah, I just saw a post from the Underground Texas Grotto the other day of students trying out some LiDAR in caves and seeing how it could work. Great. Our last question is about how this work relates to water quality. So when you're using LiDAR to go and find these features or identify features, how does that relate to water in the aquifer, groundwater in general, and just kind of the Texas karst landscape?
Sure. Well, like I said earlier, some of these sinkholes there were lots of reasons for ranchers to plug them up. They didn't want their livestock to fall in or get sick and hide in them, or, caves are a visceral thing to people. The human condition is to avoid tight, dark places, and so they would say, well, I don't want that hole. Let's put a dump truck full of boulders and dirt in there. And so when they're plugged, we have recharge. Lots of recharge happens in creek beds like Onion Creek. We also have upland recharge where the rainfall hit, and if the sinkhole is plugged and the rainfall runs off, we're losing that to the aquifer. It'll go into a stream bed and then run on the surface down toward the Gulf and into the Colorado or the Brazos, and move off. With every cave we open up, it's a very small addition to the recharge potential, but every sinkhole that we open up, we're providing another avenue for that water to go down into the ground. And so the more we find, the more we learn about the karst ecosystems in general, whether or not one cave has an actual measurable impact on the recharge of the Edwards Aquifer, the more we find, the more awareness that we're going to have in general, and the more we're going to be able to try to preserve these lands. Because once they're developed and once they're impacted, once a parking lot's on there, once a big box store is on there, that recharge potential is just removed from the system. It's gone. The cave beneath, a big box store, that was built in the 70s or 80s, the caves are still there. It's just they don't receive anything. They don't interact with the surface anymore. And so, those passages are still there and will be for a long time, but they just can't participate in anymore. And so, the impact on overall water quality is, to my mind, the greatest impact is just revealing, sort of like the Wizard of Oz, pulling back the curtain on what we imagine is out there. You know, we've got this 2,000-acre property and we know there's caves. We don't know much about them, that sort of thing. But when I come and say, no, there's, 19 giant sinkholes out there that nobody knew about, it can change minds. And, you never know. When I talk about caves, I try to get people to remember, you never know what conversation someone's going to have someday with someone who has an impact and says, hey man, the caves are cool. There's a bunch out there. We should try to protect them. That is the biggest impact overall, is saving the broad ecosystem, because it's the sum total of all the little cave openings, not just one that you save.
Thanks so much, Rich. We really appreciate it.
You got it.